Here for our panel discussion. From here on out, the work will get a lot more interactive, but we have Meredith Hurley, who's had a writing assistant in her class. Was it for 2 semesters or 1 semester?
I've had for, I would say, 3 semesters.
Okay.
I had English 250, a fellow, as well as English 1A.
And you've worked with 2 different?
3.
3, okay, so you have a really good range. Martha, or Oral, you've been working with the writing assistants for a long time.
And
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been lucky enough to have the same one twice because of my schedule. But I've worked with a lot of them, and a lot of them that have moved on to doing other things and stuff. So yeah, cool. Allie was also one of my tutors. She was in my 1A class.
And then we have Daniel Gallo, and it's kind of interesting because for me he feels like a very long time vet, and in introducing himself just a minute ago, he's been here a year. So, and you've been a fellow, or you've been a writing assistant for a pretty significant portion of that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
The whole year. Yeah. Okay. And you've only worked with Tiffany, right?
yeah.
Okay. And Tiffany Palsgrove, a very dedicated participant in the program and is bringing a lot of really rich ideas from other campuses. And she has worked in writing centers and is very familiar with the pedagogy and is bringing a lot of insight into the development of as we move forward. So we're going to be, like I said, for about the next half hour, talking specifically about the program as it has existed for the last couple years or so. So keep that in mind, and then we'll introduce some of the ways that it's changing. I wanted to ask particularly the instructors, please give us an example of a positive outcome that occurred because of your relationship with the peer tutor assigned to your class. So something that you're pretty confident wouldn't have happened were it not for the existence of the peer tutor. So go ahead and think about that for a second, and if anybody has an answer to go right away, that would be awesome. And
I have an answer to go right away.
awesome.
Last fall, I had Juan Orozco in my class. He was going to be working with the Learning Commons this semester, but he'd been in two different classes of mine, and then showed up as my writing assistant, SI, whatever we were calling them then, and then he noticed a group of young women who were extremely shy. They were all second language learners, and they, I got their first day, kind of who am I papers back from them, and they all said, oh, my English is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And he really, he picked up on that almost immediately because he's bilingual as well. And he went and I mean, he just kind of brought these women along and built up their confidence. And I mean, he worked with all of the students, but he really did help these women a lot. Worked with them, brought them along. By the end of the semester, they had confidence in their ability to write and speak in English, and they finally started speaking in class. So I don't think that would have happened as quickly without Juan, just simply because you've got 28 students in your class, and it's really hard to take a lot of care of a certain group.
The primary example that comes to mind is one that happened in the spring. And I had a student in my class who was in mental distress, but I wasn't aware of that until my fellow came and shared with me that during one of the sessions that fellow had, the weekly tutoring sessions outside of class, that the student had shared some information with the fellow that showed to me that student needed some kind of support. And so without that fellow, I don't think that student would have disclosed that information about wanting to, for the student wanting to harm himself. And so I was able to connect with that student outside of class and connect with that student with a counselor and to get that student the support that student needed. And then that student remained in the class, completed the class, and I don't think that student would have continued on without that happening.
I don't know that I have one specific example, but in my Tuesday, Thursday class, Daniel was my SI for. I don't think necessarily because of our relationship classes, it was just Daniel being awesome. But the students, I want to say on a regular basis, at least 10 would attend his study sessions that followed every single class. And there was a time where, what was the most you had?
Like up to like 16.
Yeah, there would be up to 16 that would attend his study sessions. And I think as a result of that, it created a really strong sense of community in our classroom. There were, the majority of the students who finished the class, the grades were night and day from their first essay went to when they started. You could really see the improvement for these students that regularly attended, and more than half of the students in the class worked his study sessions into their schedules because they saw the value in it. And I think as a result, it was just a really great class. I think my favorite so far.
I would like you guys to be very honest in this next part, because I think it's, people do have concerns about taking on this faculty. It's asking for more. So I would ask you to list some of the things or name some of the things that made it more challenging, made your jobs more challenging because you are now working with this extra component. And please, be candid.
Well, at one point early on, when we first started having SI people in our classrooms, I had a pair in my classroom. I had two, and that was challenging. And they had very, very definite ideas about how a class should be taught. And I had my SI raise her hand and say, "Well, aren't you going to teach fanboys?" And I said, "No, I'm not," and continued. But I've had one or two times when fellows have kind of tried to impose their learning style or their way of the way they think people should be taught onto my class. And I think what it comes down to, and after that experience, the one thing I learned is that as an instructor, I have to spend time with my fellow, especially if it's somebody I don't know personally, that has not been in my class, doesn't know how I conduct my class, how things work. I need to spend time with that fellow saying, look, this is what I expect from you. This is how I expect you to behave. This is specifically what I want you to do. So that does take some time. And as an adjunct, most of us don't have a lot of that. So, but it's definitely worth it. I would, you learn as you have these people in your classroom, you learn over time exactly what you expect.
So it takes time.
It does. It takes time because the first couple of years or the first couple of semesters, didn't have a clue what I was supposed to do with this person. I had one whole semester that I didn't realize I actually had an SI in my class until the very last week of school.
Oh, no.
And I said to her, "Why haven't you turned in anything?" She goes, "Oh, I'm your SI. And you didn't tell me that the first day. It didn't occur to you to let me know." So, and it's one of those things. I think that I have yet to have an SI, except that one time that was a super shy person who had trouble, communicating. But, you never know. It's kind of a roll of the dice, right?
I'd say for me, when I started, it was more about just not knowing what to do with an SI and what it looked like, and it was confusing for me, just the whole concept of it. It was like, so there's this person that just sits in my class, I don't get it. And asking a lot of questions and then just kind of figuring it out through trial and error, figuring out what worked. It helped me. I found that if I give my SI all of my assignments in advance and talk in advance, this is what we're doing in the course, and I go through the course and make sure that my SI has a thorough understanding, it makes everything go a lot smoother throughout the course of the semester. The other questionable issues have more to do with the students who expect the SI to cheat for them and give them the answers. Did you have that? I know my SIs that first
They tried,
semester.
yeah.
So,
Didn't succeed. But.
and I don't know. I try not to intervene between my SIs and the students. I feel like that's their relationship, although there's a part of me that struggles just with knowing that feeling, like that's, I don't know, do I intervene, do I not? Like so for me, that's the part that I still struggle with, like at what point do I intervene, because I do want that relationship to be strong without me as being a part of it.
Tiffany, would you mind saying a little bit more about that, particularly as somebody who's coming from this pedagogical background? Why is it important for that relationship to be independent of you, even at risk of these difficult situations arising?
Well, because I feel like if my hand is too heavy over the relationship, the students aren't going to be as open to the peer tutor in the class. I feel like part of what makes the peer tutor so inviting is that I am completely removed from it, and it's between the two of them, and it's for them to work out. And anytime that my fellow has come to me with concerns, they stay between us. If it's a large group concern, I will address it in the class, but I won't say necessarily that I know who gave that information. So I always try to keep that distance because I think it strengthens their relationship, and I think that strong relationship is important for both the peer tutor and the students in the class.
Thank you. Sure.
Now, say you're in class, are the peer tutors, can you ask them to say, read the 2 books that are required of the class?
We're going to get into all of those logistics,
Okay.
and you're going to have, I think you're going to have all the really direct answers to that kind of question. So, thanks.
Can you remind me? We're talking
Sure.
about challenges,
Challenges,
right?
like, and in
okay,
a
because I was
candid
really
way.
focused on
Yeah.
Tiffany's response, and I was thinking of my own response. Anyway, so as I'm sitting here, I'm remembering. I said 3 different SIs. I actually had 4, and they all have. I think one of the challenges is that I think only one I was able to have time to coordinate and meet with before the semester started, like a week before, like a few days before. And that was helpful because otherwise it's just kind of like they show up and you're like, hi, and then you're excited that they're there, but then you feel like, who is this person, and like what's their personality, and like do they feel comfortable just talking to the class on the first day? If I'm like, hey, this is my fellow, and this is what this person is going to do. And so I wish there was a way to, and I know with schedules that I could meet and have kind of a 20-minute maybe conversation just to kind of gauge how our personalities are going to kind of meet up before the semester starts, so I'm not kind of learning on the fly in front of my class at the same time. And then in another way, I think that I learn over time that some fellows I've had are I've never had personality clashes, let's just say that, but I think they have different strengths. So some may be stronger as well as far as connecting with the students, but maybe not as strong with the material of the class. And so I might need to give that person more direction on the material of the class, of like maybe they want more guidance on how to do the tutoring sessions outside of class. And so we talk a lot and kind of see where comfort levels are. Others are, maybe they connect in a way that doesn't seem like they're connected to students. It seems a little more like tough love type connection. And so, but students still came to that fellows sessions, so it was effective to a certain extent. So I try to, like Tiffany was saying, like I try not to just get in the way too much because I want the students to, connect in a way that makes sense for them. And I've had SIs or fellows who just are super confident and they like hit the road running. They're very, we connect, they connect, we have similar styles as far as working with students, and so that's always nice too. So I think I've kind of just learned that I have to be flexible and kind of see and read and understand how my SI's personality and that SI's connection with like how confident they are in terms of the material of like giving support with the writing itself, and kind of gauge and adjust as we go. So the more we talk, that's a little bit of extra time. So maybe sometimes it's only like 5 or 10 minutes right before class, but at least it's something. So there is that.
Jump in
yeah.
on this? So I just wanted to jump back in on one thing that, that kind of follows off on what Tiffany said about creating the relationship and kind of stepping away, or letting the fellow create the relationship with the students. I've also found that sometimes the students, in a couple of cases, the students have not been as, I don't want to say respectful, because that's not really where they should be, but they haven't taken the fellow seriously, or they've thought, that the fellow, oh, it's just another student in the class, and they didn't really get it because they weren't listening or whatever. And I've found that in a couple of cases, especially when my SI was a fairly shy, quiet SI, that I've had to kind of make sure that they come to the front of the class and sit in the front of the class and give them a position of power, as opposed to being in the general melee. I mean, if you've got a strong fellow with a good, strong personality, then that fellow can be anywhere and still maintain the sense of power that they need to have in order to help tutor these students. But if your fellow's quiet or shy or something like that, they really need to be presented to the students as something more than just another person in the class. And they need to have some kind of position of power within the class. I mean, when Allie was in my class, she always sat on the front row. Juan is enormously tall. I mean, he's what, 6'5" or something like that. He's giant. He doesn't need a position of power. He's a big guy. But I had a fellow that was a teeny little girl, and I was surprised that she was a fellow too, because she looked like she was 12. And so she really needed that position of power in the front of the classroom, looking back at the students from the same perspective as I have.
Wow, that's super helpful. Daniel,
Yes.
I would like you to say something about, and I asked Tiffany's permission for you to be as honest as you can, because they've worked very closely together. What's something that you have seen in your position as a peer tutor that you think is easy for teachers to miss? So an insight that you have that the rest of us would miss potentially if we were in that same class with you.
I think just the disappointment of sometimes they get low grades, so they get really disappointed, but it's not like a teacher's their friend, handing them A's because they're cool with them. It's just the work that they have to work on. So I would say just the disappointment, but I had a student that was like pretty disappointed with the low grade. All you really have to do is just help them understand where it's coming from, and then they kind of get it that it's not like a friend type thing. It's more of like the work environment.
And I had another question that I wanted to ask, but maybe that will emerge from the group. I wanted to ask about how the panelists and the peer tutor encourage a connection, but I feel like some of that already came out. So, so maybe you could get into more the logistics about how you encourage that relationship in your response to some other questions, but also I heard some couple of questions like, I don't know what to do with the peer tutor. So how are you actually using the peer tutor? There's the out-of-class sessions, but there's also what potentially can happen in the classroom. Hopefully those things will emerge, but with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to the audience and to see what questions you have or what you'd like to from the panelists. And it doesn't matter if you're an instructor or you're a peer tutor or an incoming peer tutor, please feel confident to ask. Yes?
I have a question for Martha. So remember you were saying how you kind of had to explain to your tutor what was appropriate in the classroom or what you expected of them. Did you feel like you kind of explained your teaching philosophy to them? Just because, you know what I mean? Like, say they expected you to sort of go, teach grammar, and I know just knowing you that your teaching philosophy is more about critical thinking. It's not about like going over grammar rules. So did you feel like you
In some cases, when it was new, a fellow that I did not know, that I had never seen had in class, or didn't really, I may have seen around campus but didn't really know them, yes. I felt like I kind of had to after that one experience of the fanboy things, yes, I did definitely start talking about my own personal teaching philosophy and the way I conducted my class.
probably really helps for
Yeah, I mean, maybe Allie can answer that even better, because I didn't know Allie when she came into my class, and we didn't have time to talk even before class, because Allie didn't realize how long it took to get to Morgan Hill in the morning. But so poor thing, she came running in all out of breath and hysterical and upset, and I've said, don't worry, just sit down, relax, take a breath. But did I really talk much about that, about my teaching philosophy with you, or did you just have to pick that up as we went along?
In the beginning, you mentioned just in the syllabus how you wanted to phrase things, but as far as teaching grammar and all that, no.
Yeah.
No, you went right into the subject, right into the blocks, and that was it.
So yeah, I try to give them, it depends on time. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If you're meeting your fellow 10 minutes or 5 minutes before the class starts on that first day, there's not that much that you can really, in my opinion, that you can really impart in that 5 minutes. Because especially as it's the first day of school, and it's kind of like a blind date that's been set up by your grandmother. You never know what you're going to get. So you're kind of just standing there going, I don't know what I'm going to get, and I don't know who you are. So this is good. This is what we're going to do today.
I'm just thinking it might be really cool to actually encourage instructors to write something up that they give their fellows.
And
This is
I
my
think
teaching
that's wonderful
philosophy,
if you
this
have
is my
time and
interests,
stuff, and yeah.
think
At
it's
some
okay
point,
to try.
didn't you or somebody a few years back write up, or maybe it was Scott, wrote up like a letter to the
Yeah.
fellows, and I have a copy of that floating around somewhere. But yeah, if you have time to write something like that up. For me though, one of the things that I've kind of learned over the years is, especially coming in with a new fellow, is the first week, maybe 2 weeks, is kind of a learning about each other time anyway. So the fellow is observing you, you're observing the fellow, and hopefully figuring out strengths and weaknesses, and then going from there. And then, so maybe it's more effective, I don't know, but maybe it would be more effective to start, say, okay, just kind of be a model student for the first few weeks. And then let's talk at the end of that, and we can figure out the role and figure out what's going on. Because it might be better, it might work better if you don't know somebody, to be able to do that and observe. Is that clear?
Yeah, I think I understand that. Any other thoughts or questions? Think about, say somebody's showing up in your class on Monday. What are you going to need to know? What do you want to know? You know how as the instructor, it's always just hard to decide, is the silence a ruminating silence, or a silence, or a question? Yeah.
This would help some teachers who I know have struggled in the past, but would be almost impossible knowing you to help with this. But it would be really great if the teacher wasn't just given a person that he or she didn't know, but some sort of introduction from you or somebody, like, hey, here's this person, here's his strengths, here's what he's working on, here's what to expect from this personality. I know that would have helped several other teachers. I just don't know how to do it, like, to do that professionally.
Yeah,
But when
right,
you
right,
get
right.
someone who's a little quirky, it'd be nice to be warned.
Maybe it could be a phone call.
Yes, I agree.
Maybe it could even be a phone call. Maybe that's what has to happen.
Like,
It
here's
has to
who
be-
you're
yeah.
getting, here's,
Yeah.
here she's great, here's what you might need to work on a little.
And maybe that can't always happen before school, because like they're still working on schedule, but that could happen in the first week. That could, and then that, I think that would help, because some of the problems we've had in the past, and so everybody, peer tutors, close your ears, because I don't even want you to know that this is a possibility, but people have like, oh, they haven't been here for 3 weeks, and they haven't been here for 3 weeks. I didn't know that. I only know that if somebody tells me, but maybe somebody's not calling me because we don't already have that relationship established. So that's helpful. Yeah, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if it's inappropriate for me to hone in on something really specific, but what you said about a teacher sometimes missing, instructor sometimes missing the fact that a student can be very disappointed in a grade that they receive. How do you break that to the instructor and deal with it in practical terms?
Great question.
Well, I know there was like this one assignment that a lot of people didn't understand, and there wasn't like A's.
They didn't follow directions.
Yeah. so I talked to Tiffany, and I just told her that a lot of people were just confused about the whole thing, and she actually just brought it up to the classroom that these were the directions and they didn't follow them, and from that they learned to actually follow the
They
directions.
learned to read the prompt.
This is interesting because you're saying they didn't read the directions, but if everyone in the class had a hard time understanding the directions, I always think that might be my responsibility too.
There were 6. There were 6 who did not do well and did not follow the directions. There were
And-
6.
And then
They really didn't follow the directions. It was a personal essay, and they turned in an analysis.
Students not following directions. I always feel like if there's more than 2, that I might need to put it differently.
But the part that I'm hearing that I think is really rich, and Daniel, I know you have more to say too, is that the disappointment. Because I think a lot of times as instructors we're focused on, you didn't follow the directions, and the disappointment that was now an obstacle to learning. So do you want to say any more about that, that your role in helping mitigate that kind of, what could have become an emotional block at that point?
Yeah, well, it's just like to me, it's like sometimes they take it too personally, but I mean, that's happened to me before too, and then it's kind of something to learn from, and where you messed up, and then it doesn't usually happen, because after that assignment, everyone started following the prompt.
So it actually was a moment of growth.
Yeah, it was.
It was. Daniel just told me that they're upset about this, even though when I returned them, said, you didn't follow directions, you can redo it and turn it back in. And they still went to Daniel. They were still disappointed. They were still upset. Daniel told me they're still upset. So we actually had the next class an unpacking session where we sat and talked about it. Like, as a class, we sat and talked extensively about their feelings about this assignment, my feelings. We were all very candid. That conversation, though, wouldn't have happened had Daniel not told me that there was still disappointment, even though I felt like I had already explained what had happened. I had already given them a chance to redo it, but there were these resonating feelings, and they were very recharged after that. They did well afterwards.
May I pop in there too? One of the things that the SIs do in my class, and I tell them straight up at the beginning, is if something I say or hand out or whatever in class is not clear, they need to raise their hands on the spot and say, because we've all done it. We've been talking and we're enthusiastic about it, and all of a sudden, we're talking and way up here or out in La La Land someplace, and then that sometimes the SI can bring us back down to earth and focus back on to what the students are not getting out of what I'm saying, which is wonderful.
So, yes, how about Monica? I want to give Meredith a chance to chime in, and then we'll probably be closing this section up and getting more into the nitty gritty and the involvement of each of us. Yeah.
The SIs or the fellows that are assigned to a class, have they taken that class before?
They have, yes, they have taken that class, but not with that potential instructor, yeah. They have to have passed the class successfully in order to be tutoring in that class.
They have an idea of the SLOs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you want to have a last word? I mean, I don't want to put you on
I don't have
spot.
anything specific that, I mean, everything that's been brought up has been things that I've experienced and appreciated with the fellows, in my classroom. I just think I just really appreciate the opportunity to work with fellows. I mean, I mentioned the personality thing, but I really appreciate seeing it through their eyes, because they can be more candid with me than a student in the class who's taking it for a grade. They'll just, if I just say, does this not make any sense, or how did it go for you, listening to me explain something, they have no problem saying, or I think they have no problem saying. Henry can speak to maybe that from last semester. But I do get more candid responses from them, and so that's really helpful for me, even though I do have other opportunities in the class for students to anonymously give me feedback on how well they understand things. But just having the fellow in there as well just gives me another opportunity to understand it in a richer way.
Well, thank you, everyone.